all throughout the month of January, we have been talking about our team, what it means to be on mission with our team. And yesterday, we had a wonderful opportunity to connect with some of you through our Connect membership class. And really, the class is just getting information, knowing more about who we are and a part of our values. We talked about our team values and so much more as we looked at what does it mean to be a member of our church. And afterwards in the afternoon, the deacons and elders met and we did a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, a lot of praying for our congregation. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone as we talk about becoming a member of the church, it doesn't mean that we're interested in just a list of members somewhere. It doesn't mean you end up getting a card that gives you a discount at Starbucks. No, that's not going to happen, right? When we talk about people becoming a member of the church, it simply means that we want to connect with you in a deeper way. We want you to prayerfully consider, is God calling you to this group of believers, this people, so that we can walk together through life? We can encourage each other and help one another. So when you hear us talking a lot about church membership, it's that. And maybe from your culture and your faith background, it meant something else. But let us assure you, it simply means that we want to lean into relationship with you and help you discover all that God has for you and for us. As we think about who we are and how we're created, we are created to connect with people. It's why Christianity isn't meant to be just this isolated thing on our own, but our faith is lived out in relationship with God, relationship with others. And that relationship, both in a vertical and a horizontal way, helps us grow. Out of that growing, we have a desire more and more out of our love for God and others to serve God and to serve others. It's how we're created, so that it's not just my fate for me and I get what I want and my life gets better, but it's about how does it impact my brothers and sisters sitting here next to me and in my building and in my neighborhood and in my world, right? So we've talked a lot about how God has created us to serve, and we're challenging people to jump into a team and join us in the work of serving God and serving others. But what does it mean to be on a team at IBCB? Well, we're using the acronym of TEAM to spell out 4 core values. So if you've been with us over the last couple Sundays, you know what's about to happen, right? Here we go with pep rally mode, right? So give me a T. And what does T stand for? Time with God. And give me an E. And what does that E stand for? Oh. Right. Give me an A. What does that stand for? Thanks. And give me an M. What does that stand for? Mission first. Now, unless you think, where have I gone? Who are these crazy people? I decided that you're more likely to remember it. This is the teacher in me. You're more likely to remember it if you say it and you repeat it and you're an active learner. So we want you to be a part of the what? T. And what are we becoming? A. Exactly right. So we talked about time with God. What does that mean to spend time with God? Well, we talked about how we run on prayer, the Holy Spirit, Bible study, and fasting. These are some spiritual discipline, some practices, right? And the reason they're called spiritual practices is because we keep practicing and practicing and we won't ever get it perfectly right? We just keep doing it. Because Jesus said that if we remain connected to Him, we will continue to grow. And we talked about that image of the vine, that He says, if you abide in me and I in you, then you will bear much fruit, but apart from me, you can do nothing. So time with God is our first, maybe the most important of the values. Then Lucas talked about empowering. Jesus said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men, fishers of people. What does that mean? Bringing others into this life-changing faith. But we don't do that if we're the only one being trained and equipped. We want to empower other people so that no one is irreplaceable, right? Just this morning, the beginning of the afternoon, I saw Samuel's son back there with our video team, and he's setting up the camera and he's watching what they're doing. It starts at a young age, but that's how we prepare the next generation of the church, right? Is inviting people in, teaching them how to do these things. Jesus could have done it all himself, right? He didn't need 12 misfits with no theological education and really bad background. They messed it up, right? Sometimes. But he invited them into the relationship so they could grow and they could sense that empowering. And they could see that with God, they could do things they could never do on their own. And then last week, we talked about what does it mean to be authentic? It means that we share our struggles and that we hear about the relationship that those around us have with God. We don't need another place to pretend. We need a place where we can be completely who God has called us to be. And the beautiful thing is that God reminds us that it's in our weakness that God is actually the most strong. And I see it all the time in my life. When I strike out on the Brian Kirby path with the Brian Kirby strength, it doesn't go nearly as well as when I strike out on the path with God. And God calls me to do something that I can't do without God. That's really the best way to know that God's calling you to do it. Because if you can do it without God, God probably is saying, well, just go do that. But I'm going to take you, and we're going to talk about this today, on a mission and an adventure that's going to surprise you. So today we talk about mission first. We own the mission, not the position. And we get to do this. We're going to see this in the example of Jesus Christ, who again, God washing the feet of his disciples. What a beautiful image of serving other people. What a surprising model of leadership, right? In the seminary that I attended in the United States, at our graduation, they gave us a towel. In addition to my diploma, I got a small towel with my name on it. And the president of the seminary washed the feet of another one of the professors to say, this is what you're going in the world to do. Don't think this diploma gives you any sort of power. It's calling you to serve, right? In the example of Jesus. And that's always stuck with me, right? In case you fall asleep or miss any part of this, I want you to hear right now the most important thing I'm going to say, which is that Jesus and God, the mission for our life is so much better than what we can imagine. But we get the chance to say yes or no to it. But God's mission for us is so much better than what we can imagine. Have any of you seen any of these Mission Impossible films? Anybody dare admit that you've seen those? I've seen some. I don't know if I've seen all 6. I think there's 6 of them. This is a series of films. It started out of a television show, and it's Tom Cruise, who plays Ethan Hunt, who is this super character who seems to be able to do amazing things. What's crazy is that Tom Cruise says he does all of his own stunts. So when I'm watching those movies and realizing he's older than me, it maybe gives me a complex. I don't know about you, but anyway, that's confessional. That's confessional, right? But when I'm watching the overarching theme, if you've seen all of these movies, there is a moment of decision-making. So if technology works for us, we have a short clip about this key moment that happens in every film. Take it away, Wesley. If not, we have the video, but we have no sound. Well, the video, in each of the movies, it says, and maybe even you know this, your mission, should you choose to accept it, right? Everyone say that after me. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, right? And so he's faced with this moment, and then usually something blows up or has to throw something away. Luckily, we don't face that, right? But we are each faced with this idea of your mission, should you choose to accept it. So there are 2 parts of that. Really, what is our mission as a Christian? What is our mission as a church? And then how do we accept it? Well, we know that our mission as a church, and I'm going to invite you to read this if you need to read it, but you should probably know it already, right? Our mission is to help people find and... Right, exactly right. Where does that come from? And it was wonderful because we heard it right up here in the mouths of the people being baptized today, this important scripture in Matthew 28. You see it there on the screen where Jesus says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit," or Ghost, "and teaching them to obey everything that I command you," or have commanded you. "And surely I will be with you always to the end of the age." So Jesus gave us the mission. It's the same mission for all of us. Right there it is, in case you're wondering. We just shortened it into helping people find and follow Jesus. But it's not my words. It's not your words. The mission comes from God, right? But how do we accept that mission? What does that sound like? Well, accepting God's mission means saying yes to what God asks you to do and going to do it. There you go. The end. End of the sermon. Let's go have lunch. It should be that simple, but it's not. And there are reasons why we don't accept God's mission. And the first one is, it's because God interrupts our life. God's mission will interrupt our plans and send us in new direction, right? The story of the Bible is just that, God interrupting people's lives. If you look at Abraham all the way back, he's living his life, he's old, his wife's old, they're done for. God appears and says, "I'm going to move you. You're going to be the father of a new nation. You're going to have all these descendants." And they're like, "What are you kidding? We're old," right? What is this plan? Our plan is to get older and die, right? Here we are. God sends them on a new direction. The same with Moses. The same with David. All the big characters that we see in the Bible, it's God interrupting their life to call them to something they wouldn't have imagined and couldn't have done on their own. We see it so much with Moses because Moses gives a bunch of excuses. God says, "I want you to go and deliver the people." And what does he say? "I'm not a good speaker. I don't want to go back there. Can I remind you that I'm wanted for murder because I murdered somebody and buried a body?" All that to Moses. And God's like, "I'm not letting you off the hook. I'm going to make a way. I'm going to send Aaron with you. He's going to be the speaker." God interrupts our life and sends us in a new direction. And so that means that sometimes it's hard to do. God also calls us to leadership that doesn't look like anything we've seen before. And for that, I want us to go into the text a bit deeper that we mentioned earlier about this feet washing thing. What's happening there? So look with me in John chapter 13. John chapter 13, it says, "It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." Isn't that just beautiful? He loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So Jesus already knew that his betrayer was right there among the group. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "Do you not realize? You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you'll understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord, Simon Peter, he's so funny. He's from one extreme to the other, right? This is so Simon Peter's life, right? "Then Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Just drown me in it," right? Jesus answered, Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you," and he looks out, "for he knew who was going to betray him." And that was why he said not everyone was clean. Jesus acts as a rabbi, as a teacher, as a leader. What a surprising act of service. What a surprising act of leadership. They hadn't seen leadership like that before. This wasn't what rabbis did. They had their feet washed by their students, right? Leaders came in and insisted on certain things. Here's Jesus, the Son of God, who's taken off his clothes and he's washing their feet to show them that it is love over power, serving over being served, right? He taught them a very important principle of leadership, and that is that if you are too big to serve, then you're too small to lead. Think about that. If you're too big to serve other people, if you think you're too big and too important to serve other people, then you're actually too small in character to be a good leader, right? Because the call is for us to serve other people. That's what Jesus was doing. And he spent time making sure that his will and God's will were perfectly aligned. We have these moments where he's spending time out in the desert and he's doing these things that people weren't expecting. He was surprising them, calling them to live differently, calling them to love God and love others. So, how can we know what God's mission is for us in our individual lives? Because it looks different for Lucas or Matthias and Samuel and me and Kenya. The way God is calling us to serve looks different for each of us, which is why we have this tagline, we own the mission together, not the position. Because it means that sometimes you might be a deacon and sometimes you're mopping the floor, right? Or sometimes I'm preaching and sometimes I'm coming early to turn the water on to fill the baptistry, like this morning, right? Or we're cleaning up. There's no idea that just because we have some title that we're too big to serve other people, to do what needs to be done. So we own the mission of the church, whatever it takes to help people find and follow Jesus. That's what we're called to do. So how do we know what it looks like for us? Well, prayer is a really good place to start. To say, okay, God, I want you to speak to me and tell me what my mission is. But unfortunately, if your prayers are like mine, a lot of times my prayer is talking God into my mission and not the other way around. If I'm not careful, I spend a lot of my prayer time telling God what to do. I have to believe God probably laughs at me most of the time, right? Like if I did that, you'd miss this amazing thing that's going to come if you'll just give in and do what I want you to do. Because remember, God's plans for our lives are so much better than our own. Yet we act like children in our prayer lives, and it's give me, do. And I think God is just saying, hey, stop. Take a breath. Listen to what I have for you, because it's going to change your life, and you're going to go on an adventure with me. And this is your mission. If you choose to accept it, if you choose to hear it. The challenge for us being on mission with God as well is that we can't be on mission with God until we put down our own mission. We can't be on mission with God if we're still driving the bus, if we're still insistent on our way and our mission. It really happens when we lay it all down and we say, guide me, direct me. I want to go where you want me to go. Because again, God's plans are so much better than our own. And then when God calls us to do something that shocks us and surprises us, we have to remember this mantra of, I don't have to do this, right? Your mission, should you choose to accept it. So I don't have to do it, but I get to do this. It's an honor. It's a blessing. Serving God and God's people is a wonderful way to know God and God's people better. Why wouldn't we want to be a part of that? we get to do this. But again, many of us don't want to accept Jesus' mission because we don't completely trust God. We don't completely trust God. We think that God might be there for us when we need God, maybe. We're unsure. We're uncertain. What does that mean? Right? We're afraid that God's going to ask us to do something that we can't do on our own. Guess what? God is going to ask you to do something that you can't do on your own. You'll know it. I can promise it. I can promise it to you. But that way, then we depend on God. We also don't want to accept God's mission for us because God might ask us to do something we don't want to do, like wash people's feet. I don't know about you, but I don't like feet. I don't want to wash people's feet, right? It feels awful. But it's an act of beautiful service. I remember in my last church, we had a class called Foundations, and as part of that, we talked about foot washing, and then there was a moment in the class where we washed each other's feet. And there were a lot of us all spread around the auditorium. There were about 150 of us on that evening, each washing each other's feet. And I had to step in for a coach who wasn't there. So not only was I washing the feet of all of my group, but then I had to step over for another group that I didn't know as well. And there was this amazing guy, this African-American guy who was about almost 2 meters tall. And as I leaned over his foot, it was the biggest foot I've ever seen. I don't know what size that foot was. It looked like 50. I don't know what number that is, 55. It was this big. And I thought, really, God, I don't like feet. And this is the biggest foot I've ever seen. It's going to take me forever to wash this foot. It would hardly fit in the basin that we had. It was so large. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm doing this. You're calling me to do this. And as I washed his feet, he began to cry. And then he began to just sob. And then I started crying. And I'm sure my tears were mixing in with what I was washing. And then God spoke in my heart and said, this is why I'm asking you to do this. Look how touched he was. And we talked afterwards about this experience. And he was overwhelmed that one of the pastors in his church would wash his feet. And I said, I'm just like you. I'm just a person, right? We should be serving each other, right? It was a beautiful moment, but it took me out of my comfort zone. And if you'd asked me walking in there if I wanted to wash his feet, I would have said, no, I don't want to do that. There are lots of times when we might first say, God, no, I don't want to do that. But it's so much better when we say yes. It's so much better when we say yes. I preached a similar sermon to this one just before we moved here. It was the last sermon that I had preached at Community Church back in Virginia. And afterwards, after preaching about how God interrupts our plans and we have to say yes, I went to lunch with my daughter, Annalise. Denise was homesick, and it was just the two of us. And we got to brunch in Washington, D.C., and we sat down, and we hadn't been at the table 2 minutes until Annalise said, your sermon changed my life, and I want to tell you how. And I, like I'm feeling right now, I could just feel it welling up. And I was like, whew, I may have to leave the table because I want to just go cry about what's going to happen, because Annalise had gone through this moment in COVID and going off to college where she wasn't going so much, or she was saying she was watching online, and I never really was sure if she was. And I just wasn't really sure where she was in her faith at 20. But I knew that she owned it, right? She's an adult. And I honestly thought in my heart we were going to go to lunch, and she was going to say, okay, 1,000th sermon I've heard from you, great. But by the way, I'm not going back to church anymore. That's kind of where I thought the conversation might go. So I was coming with a little bit of fear to the table. And when she said, God has changed my life through your words, and I want to tell you how, I couldn't believe it, because she's heard me preach her whole life. She's been stuck with me being her pastor since birth, right? So she's heard many sermons from me. But what she said was, God is interrupting my life. And I've been running from studying music because I wanted to study political science and languages because that felt safe. And that's what mom does. And I want to follow in those footsteps, that travel the world and do those things. But now God is saying to me, I have to study music. And I am going to be leading worship, at least in this church and maybe in other churches. God is calling me to something and I don't know what it is yet, but I want to say yes. And so we prayed together. We talked about what it might mean to add another degree and how much longer she'd have to go to college and how much more that was going to cost and all that. And she started that degree a little over a year ago. And she's doing amazingly well in both degrees. She's doing both at the same time. And God is blessing her in it because she said yes. And God wants to bless us if we'll say yes. I wish I could say I've always said yes, but I haven't. There have been times when I've gone kicking and screaming in the wrong direction, and God has pulled me back, and God has taken me, and God has forgiven me when my plan inevitably failed. God has taken me back. So as we think about what this looks like for our church, our body, all of us here today, it means that our mission first, we get to do this, means that we want you to join the team. We want you to not feel like you have to do life alone. Join a life group, join a serving team, become a member of our church. We've invited you to read the Bible with us. And there are about 65 of you on our reading plan, which is really great. Where are the rest of you? Join us. Jump in. Don't worry about catching up. We'll give you a break. You don't have to read the book of Job. We already got through Job already. So now you get the rest of the easy stuff. What was great yesterday as our deacons meeting began is we had our deacons and elders meeting, this really great conversation about Job. Because we'd all just read it together. The things we liked, the things that frustrated us, the things we didn't understand. And it was like, wow, this is really great to be on this journey together. We're reading this together. And we're all sometimes just as confused as the other one is about what's going on. But we're in it together. Have you become a member of this church? Again, it's not about a membership card or list, but it's because we want to know you better. We want to see you grow by serving other people and God, and in that way growing. So there are chances each month for you to attend a session just to get information. There's no commitment. There's no hard pressure at the end. We'll let you leave the room without signing the document. You can take them home, as many did yesterday. Some signed up immediately, and others said, I want to pray about it. Wonderful. Others said, I still have too many questions. This faith is too new to me. Wonderful. But at least we know where you are, and we get a chance to walk the journey with you. So I want to say to all of us what God is saying to each of us. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to fall in love with God and serve others. Your mission, but will you choose to accept